My name is Emily Carter, and I am 42 years old. I had just watched my son cross the graduation stage when my entire world collapsed. Right there, in front of parents, teachers, and cameras, my husband leaned in and whispered that he was leaving me. Today, after 20 years of marriage. The humiliation burned through my chest, but what he didn't know was that I had quietly uncovered something days earlier, a secret about our finances, our home, and his missing inheritance money. When he stood up to make a public announcement, I did something that made him start screaming in front of everyone. Before I continue, tell me your country and the time right now. I still remember the sound of applause when my son's name was called. Proud, loud, innocent applause. The kind that makes a parent sit straighter, smile wider, blink fast so the tears don't fall too soon. I had practiced that moment in my head hundreds of times. The hat toss, the cameras flashing, the tight hug I'd give him right after he stepped down. My hand was already halfway lifted to clap when my husband leaned toward me. His breath was warm against my ear, but his voice, cold, quiet, calculated. "I'm leaving you after this," he whispered. The words didn't feel real at first. More like a glitch in my brain, like someone had hit pause on the whole auditorium while mine kept running. I turned toward him slightly to make sure I heard it clearly, but he didn't repeat himself. He didn't have to. His eyes did the rest of the talking, steady, emotionless, determined in a way that almost felt rehearsed. My mind fumbled back through the past few weeks, like someone dropping papers in a storm. The late-night phone calls he took outside. The deleted messages. The random fights he started over things so small they didn't even deserve oxygen. The emotional distance I blamed on stress, on age, on life squeezing too hard. But it wasn't stress. It was preparation. What hurt the most was the timing, not the marriage dying, but where he chose to bury it. Our son's graduation. Our son. The one thing we had built right when everything else once felt unstable. He knew it was sacred ground. And he chose to detonate a bomb there anyway. I felt my heartbeat punch my ribs once, twice, 3 times, all uneven. My throat went dry. My fingers went numb. My palm that was raised to clap slowly curled into a fist I didn't even realize I was making. A woman sitting beside me turned to her friend. "What did he say?" she asked, loud enough for me to hear. Her friend shrugged. "I think they're arguing again," she replied. Again. That word stung differently. Because yes, we did argue. A lot. But what they didn't know was that days earlier I had found bank statements with suspicious withdrawals. My name on them. My signature on them. Only problem? I never signed a damn thing. There were transfers labeled internal relocation, emergency extractions, vague codes with massive amounts moving out of our joint account. I confronted him privately back then, and he said it was an error. Bank glitch. Paper mix-up. Someone else's account accidentally printed under ours. And I believed him. God, I actually believed him. Now here he was, choosing humiliation as his exit speech, planning to stand on stage and paint me as the villain while he walked out as the martyr. But that whisper wasn't the beginning. It was him assuming the game was already over. Except for me, that whisper flipped a switch. Because I didn't collapse into heartbreak alone. I collapsed into clarity. And clarity is dangerous when it belongs to someone who's been underestimated for 20 years. The auditorium was buzzing, full of proud parents and unsuspecting teachers, all oblivious to the quiet storm brewing between my husband and me. He straightened his jacket, cleared his throat, and began speaking, projecting that practiced smile like he owned every eye in the room. But I had already noticed her, the one person he never expected to see. She entered quietly, gliding down the aisle toward the back, her presence subtle but sharp. Someone he had underestimated, someone connected to the financial irregularities I had uncovered days earlier. The moment their eyes met, his face paled, like a ghost realizing it had been spotted. I had never seen him like this, vulnerable, almost scared, as if a secret too long buried was about to claw its way out. I stayed calm, though my chest hammered against my ribs. Every parent, every teacher, every student's gaze seemed to magnify the tension. My son looked at me, eyes wide, sensing the storm in ways words could never explain. He didn't understand why his father, The man who had promised stability for 20 years was suddenly crumbling before him. He began speaking louder, trying to salvage his performance, twisting the narrative, painting me as cold and distant while pretending to be a concerned father leaving for my supposed failings. But the woman at the back, the one who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. She didn't approach him immediately, just let her presence pierce the room. And then she spoke. One sharp, deliberate word, and the air shifted. I felt a surge of power rush through me. His eyes darted from me to her, panic slowly creeping in where arrogance had once resided. He realized this wasn't just about embarrassment anymore. There were witnesses now who could validate what I had discovered. The crowd started murmuring, sensing the tension, catching fragments of the argument that had previously been whispered. And that's when I made my first move. Calmly, deliberately, I pulled out the folder containing the initial proof of his financial manipulations, the transactions, the altered signatures, the withdrawals he thought I hadn't noticed. He froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color as the realization struck. I wasn't the victim he expected me to be. I was a storm, and I had been quietly gathering strength while he slept in arrogance. But he wasn't the only one shocked. The woman took a step forward, louder this time, addressing the room with the calm authority that betrayed her power. She revealed her connection to the irregularities, her voice carrying over the now hushed auditorium. He stammered, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The balance of power had shifted. I glanced at my son, whose eyes now mirrored a mix of fear and awe, and realized something terrifying yet exhilarating. My husband's perfect plan was crumbling. Why was she there, and what did she know that could destroy everything he had built? I stepped forward, letting the folder rest against my chest, the weight of it heavy but purposeful. The audience could now see my hands tremble, not from fear, but from controlled rage. Slowly, deliberately, I opened the folder and revealed the first set of documents: bank statements, transaction logs, and forged signatures, proof that my husband had been siphoning funds from our joint accounts and hiding money in secret offshore accounts. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some parents covered their mouths. Teachers leaned forward, eyes wide. My son's hands clutched mine, trying to steady me, but I could feel his own panic mixed with disbelief. My husband's jaw dropped. The arrogance he had worn like armor for years melted into pure panic. He reached for the papers, his fingers stretching, desperate, but I stepped back, holding them just out of reach. "You can't take these from me," I said, voice calm but cutting. "I've already sent digital copies to multiple parties who will make sure none of this disappears. Your games are over." The woman financial auditor, investigator, the one he thought would never show up, stepped closer. Her presence alone made him falter. She revealed her identity fully to the crowd, and I could see the realization in his eyes that the woman he had tried to manipulate, bribe, or intimidate was untouchable. Every lie he had spun now risked immediate exposure. Then came the moment that turned the room into a storm of whispers and gasps. She spoke his name directly, clear and unwavering, and revealed the first of many secrets he had tried to bury, a series of transactions tied to a loan he had forged in my name, signed off without my knowledge, moving our life savings to a shell account. He staggered back as if someone had slapped him, screaming, "No, that's not true. You can't," but the room had already shifted. No one was listening to his protests. The documents, the evidence, my calm defiance, all of it spoke louder than any words he could muster. Our son stepped in, his voice shaking but firm. "Dad, what is all this? Why did you lie to us?" My husband froze. His control had vanished. And then, the woman spoke again, this time revealing a second layer of betrayal, a hidden account, linked to a third party he had long trusted, whose testimony could collapse his carefully constructed alibi entirely. The auditorium erupted. Phones raised, cameras recording every detail. Every lie, every deception, every hidden theft my husband had counted on staying secret was now visible, undeniable, permanent. And in the middle of it all, I realized the first truth had been only the tip of the iceberg. There were more secrets, more betrayals waiting to unfold, and I held the key to unlocking them all. She reveals the first truth, but not the biggest one. What is he hiding that could shatter everything even further? The following day, the tension from the auditorium didn't fade. It followed us like a shadow. My husband's public breakdown was now all over social media, but there was no time to dwell on that. I had learned that the woman, the bank auditor, was not just some random observer. She was officially investigating suspicious transfers connected to my husband. And now I understood the depth of his betrayal. I recalled the late-night alerts I had secretly recorded on my phone, transfers labeled vaguely as internal relocation, emergency extraction, or simply pending adjustment. They weren't errors or glitches, they were deliberate, calculated moves. Money that had been ours for years was quietly slipping into accounts I didn't even know existed. He had spent years plotting while I trusted him blindly. The auditor stepped forward in court later that morning to testify, calmly explaining the scope of what she had uncovered. Millions of dollars moved into shell accounts, all under my husband's direction. He had assumed no one would ever trace it, that I would remain unsuspecting, silent, and obedient. I clenched my fists as she explained the legal ramifications of his actions: fraud, wire transfer violations, and financial exploitation of marital assets. What struck me even more was the identity of the person he tried to protect. My husband had named a mysterious partner as co-beneficiary in these hidden accounts, someone he trusted completely. I had never met them. I had no idea who else was involved. And suddenly, the scale of his deception became terrifyingly clear. Our son, sitting beside me, whispered, "Mom, why didn't he tell us?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the world apart for him. But I knew restraint was more powerful. Every move I made from here on out had to be precise. One wrong step, and all my evidence could be dismissed. I had to let the auditor expose the truth, let the law prove what I already knew in my gut. He had been stealing from us for years. As the auditor spoke, my husband tried to interrupt, to twist the story, claiming someone else had orchestrated it, that he was the victim of manipulation. But the auditor held her ground, revealing his attempts to cover his tracks, the encrypted messages to the mysterious partner, and the fake invoices he had submitted to the bank. The look on his face when the room reacted, shock, disbelief, whispers, was the first genuine fear I had ever seen in him. Then, as if the storm hadn't reached its peak yet, he blurted out a name I had never heard before, someone he accused of setting him up. My stomach dropped. There was another player in this twisted game, and now the courtroom, our family, and I had to contend with this new, unknown threat. Who is this mysterious person he blames, and how deep does this web of betrayal truly go? 2 days before the graduation disaster, I had followed him. I know it sounds insane, stalking my husband, but after discovering the missing transactions, I needed answers. I trailed him discreetly as he drove to a downtown office building I had never noticed him visiting before. He parked, checked over his shoulder, and hurried inside. My pulse was frantic, but I stayed hidden, heart hammering as I watched through the tinted windows. Inside, he met a woman. She wasn't someone I had expected, no, not the stereotypical mistress or shady business partner. She was sharp, professional, composed, and intimidating. Not romantic. But the discussion they had was heated, urgent, and clearly tied to finances. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught phrases like the audit, offshore accounts, and we can't let her find out. I later discovered her identity. She was a financial advisor and my husband's so-called ally in hiding his crimes. But her role wasn't what I feared. She had begun to question him, to insist he come clean, to protect herself from the legal fallout of his schemes. Panic and anger radiated off him in waves, and I realized he was desperate. Desperate not just to hide his crimes, but to hide the fact that I knew. When I revealed this information to the crowd at the graduation, my husband froze. His carefully constructed narrative crumbled as I described how he had lied, manipulated, and hidden money for years. The woman's testimony confirmed everything: transfers, fake documents, and hidden accounts. My husband attempted to twist the story, claiming she had manipulated him, that she had coerced him into committing fraud. But that was laughable. Then came the final blow: a video surfaced. I had obtained it secretly from a tip-off the woman had given me, proving he had willingly signed fraudulent documents. The evidence was irrefutable. His face paled as he realized the crowd could see it too. He sputtered, tried to regain control, but every move only made him look more guilty. The audience's eyes shifted between him, the documents, and me. My son clutched my hand, fear and anger reflecting in his gaze. My husband's arrogance had evaporated entirely, leaving only desperation. Every person in that room understood. He had underestimated me, and now his empire of lies was collapsing around him. But the biggest shock hadn't come yet. The woman revealed there was still a key piece he hadn't accounted for: one document, one account, one ledger that could expose not just him, but others in his circle. The secret was bigger than I imagined, and the audience held its collective breath, waiting to see who would crumble next. What did he sign, and who else is involved in this web of lies? The video played on the projector, crisp and undeniable. My husband's hand hovered over the document, pen in trembling fingers, as he signed a contract I had never authorized. The words on the page were clear: forged signatures, inflated loans, and financial obligations tied to me, the unsuspecting wife. My chest tightened as I watched. He had planned to leave me in crippling debt, to strip me of security while parading as the wronged spouse. I could see it in the audience: whispers, gasps, hands covering mouths. Teachers, parents, even my son, all witnessing the depth of his betrayal. My son's eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear, confusion, and heartbreak. "Mom, why would he do this?" he whispered, clutching my hand. I swallowed hard, keeping my composure, knowing the answers wouldn't make it hurt any less. The auditor, calm and authoritative, confirmed what I had feared. The contract was not isolated. It connected directly to an inheritance from his late uncle, a fortune my husband tried to divert before probate could validate it. His plan wasn't just deception, it was theft, carefully designed to appear legitimate while stripping me of any claim. My husband's panic grew as the truth was laid bare. He shouted, his voice cracking, trying to regain control of the room, but the evidence had already spoken. The digital copies I had sent earlier ensured that no escape was possible. I watched him falter, the arrogance I had known for 20 years replaced by fear, the first glimpse of vulnerability I had ever seen. Then the auditor dropped the bombshell. The contract was tied to more than just finances. It implicated a network of people, including someone I had never suspected. His older sister, who had always appeared loyal, was also entwined in this scheme, managing accounts he never wanted traced. The room seemed to shrink around him, the walls closing in as the audience realized just how far his deceit had stretched. I could feel the energy shift. The whispers grew louder, the stares sharper. And then it happened. His sister, trembling, stepped forward. She admitted she had helped him cover financial lies for years, terrified of losing her lifestyle if the truth came out. Every word she spoke cut deeper into the facade he had built so meticulously. The auditorium's attention returned to me. I held the contract, proof in hand, and the weight of every betrayal pressed down on my shoulders. But amidst the chaos, a surge of clarity coursed through me. I realized that while this contract could have destroyed me, it now gave me the power to turn the tables completely. My husband's eyes locked on mine, wild and desperate. He knew that the revelation of this contract was only the beginning, and that the next layer of exposure could ruin not just him, but everyone he had trusted to protect his secrets. The inheritance theft is only the beginning. Someone else wants revenge, and the web of betrayal is far from finished. The uncle I never met, but he remembered me. After the courtroom chaos, I returned home, my hands still trembling from the intensity of the exposure. But the battle wasn't over. There was one name that had haunted my thoughts for years, my husband's late uncle, a man I had met only once as a child. He had always seemed distant, almost cold, but now I understood he had been quietly watching, protecting, planning behind the scenes. It began with a certified letter that arrived the next morning. My name was scrawled across it in bold, unmistakable handwriting. Inside, a note from my uncle explained that he had never fully trusted my husband. He had suspected the corruption long before I had. The letter wasn't accusatory, it was precise, almost surgical. He mentioned a safe he had hidden at his estate, instructions to access it, and a warning, only you can uncover the truth. Trust no one else. I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that someone had finally been looking out for me, and fear because I knew the deeper I dug, the more I might uncover about the life I thought I knew. The letter hinted at hidden assets, financial documents, and keys to a legacy my husband never intended me to inherit. That afternoon, I drove to the uncle's estate. The air was crisp, the trees casting long shadows over the old driveway. The estate itself was imposing, a grand home with secrets layered in every corner. I walked through rooms I barely remembered, but my instincts guided me toward a small study where a cracked wall panel hid a small metal box. My uncle's handwriting was on the top, "Emily, for your eyes only." Inside, I found documents proving the extent of my husband's schemes. But more importantly, I discovered a personal note. He had written about me, not my husband, not my son, but me. He remembered a kindness I had shown him during a holiday dinner years ago, a moment so trivial that I had long forgotten it. Yet he had recorded it, noting my integrity, my ability to discern truth from lies. The auditor's revelations in the courtroom, the documents I had collected, and now this personal legacy from my uncle formed a clear pattern. I was being positioned to reclaim what my husband had tried to destroy. The estate wasn't just about money. It was a shield, a weapon, and a key to exposing everything. But there was one document still missing, a ledger, the heart of the inheritance, which would reveal the final truths and implicate every player involved in my husband's schemes. The letter hinted at it, but didn't give details. It was my responsibility to find it. And I knew my husband would do everything in his power to stop me. As I held the letter in my hands, a shiver ran down my spine. I realized that my uncle had prepared me for the ultimate confrontation. Not just with my husband, but with every betrayal, every lie, every hidden hand that had sought to control me. What property did the uncle leave me, and why was my husband terrified of it? The estate smelled of aged wood and dust, a silence that carried decades of secrets. I followed my uncle's instructions meticulously, moving through the grand hallways until I found the fire-damaged safe he had mentioned. Its metal door was scorched and warped, evidence of a desperate attempt to erase his last wishes. My heart pounded as I knelt to examine it. Inside, amid soot and ash, lay a partially burnt will, my name clearly listed as the primary beneficiary, not my husband's. I held my breath, tracing my finger over the charred edges of the paper. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. My husband had tried to burn his own uncle's final instructions. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't neglect. It was deliberate sabotage. He wanted to ensure that I, the one person his uncle trusted, would never claim what was rightfully mine. The magnitude of his betrayal was staggering. I had suspected financial misconduct, but this was more than money. It was the culmination of a lifetime of deceit, carefully hidden until now. My mind raced back to the contracts, the forged signatures, the hidden accounts. Each thread now wove into a larger, more sinister tapestry. The auditor later confirmed my suspicions. The uncle's estate had indeed been tampered with prior to probate. Someone had tried to falsify documents, manipulate signatures, and redirect assets to themselves. And my husband's fingerprints were all over it. But the documents in my hands told a story he hadn't anticipated, a story he could no longer erase. Among the burnt pages, I found a coded ledger, partially intact. It listed accounts, properties, and investments spanning decades, many of which were linked to my husband's illicit activities. It was evidence beyond doubt, a blueprint of his lies and theft. I felt a surge of power, tempered by fear. If I revealed this, the consequences would be enormous, not just for him, but for anyone complicit. And then came the shock. One of the assets listed in the ledger was tied to a family member I had always trusted. My husband's sister, the woman who had always appeared loyal and supportive, was implicated. My stomach dropped. She had been helping him cover his tracks, maintaining a facade of innocence while participating in his schemes. The ledger revealed the scale of her involvement. I realized the stakes had just escalated. This was no longer merely about reclaiming what was mine. It was about exposing an entire network of betrayal that threatened to destroy more than just my family. It could topple reputations, lives, and fortunes. My husband's desperation now made sense. He had underestimated my resolve and the extent of my uncle's foresight. As I left the estate with the ledger secured, I knew the next confrontation would be explosive. The balance of power had shifted, and every move I made from here on would determine not just my fate, but the unraveling of a web of deceit built over decades. The ledger lists one asset that could ruin multiple people, including someone I thought was innocent. The ledger rested in my hands, its weight heavier than gold. Every page told a story of deception, betrayal, and greed, but one entry made my stomach twist: a hidden offshore account linked not only to my husband, but also to his older sister. She had been silently complicit for years, her loyalty a thin veneer masking complicity in every fraudulent move he had made. My mind raced. Why had she never said a word? How deep did their alliance go? I confronted her quietly at the estate, away from the prying eyes of the auditor and my son. Her hands shook as I showed her the ledger entry. For a long moment, she said nothing, and the silence was suffocating. Then, trembling, she admitted the truth. She had helped him hide assets, falsify documents, and create shell accounts. Fear had driven her, fear of losing wealth, power, and status. She had believed that by covering for him, she could remain untouchable. Her confession hit me harder than I expected. Betrayal wasn't just my husband's domain, it had infected the people I had trusted implicitly. I realized that their plan had been decades in the making, calculated with precision and greed, and I had been living in the center of it without even knowing. But I also recognized my opportunity. The ledger wasn't just proof of crime, it was a weapon. Every transaction, every falsified signature, every hidden account documented years of wrongdoing. I could dismantle their empire not with rage, but with strategy and patience. My son watched silently, absorbing the weight of the revelations. His eyes shifted between us, between truth and betrayal, fear and awe. He understood, more than ever, that the world he had known was nothing but a fragile facade. And yet, for the first time, he also saw my strength, how I could face lies and manipulation and still hold control. The sister begged me not to reveal everything, promising that she would leave the assets untouched, that she would confess privately if I spared her publicly. I considered her offer, weighing morality against justice, knowing any leniency could cost me everything in the long run. She had underestimated me, just like my husband had. I would not make that mistake. As I prepared to take the ledger and all its secrets to the authorities, I felt a mixture of dread and exhilaration. My husband had been planning to abandon me, erase me from the picture, and claim the inheritance he had never earned. But now, armed with truth, I held the reins. I knew he would fight back, and his sister would too. They were cornered, desperate, dangerous. And yet, the ledger gave me a quiet, terrifying power, the ability to expose every lie, every hidden transaction, and every accomplice. The web of deceit was unraveling, and the first threads were mine to pull. But pulling them would lead to even bigger shocks, even deeper betrayals, and enemies I had never anticipated. If she's this scared, who else is part of this scheme, and what will they do when their secrets come to light? With the ledger secured and every piece of evidence in my possession, I knew the next step had to be strategic. This wasn't just about personal revenge, it was about legal dominance. My husband had underestimated me for 20 years, and now every law, every statute, every loophole could be used to dismantle his carefully constructed world. I hired a team of forensic accountants and a sharp attorney who specialized in marital and financial fraud. Their eyes lit up when they saw the ledger. The first meeting with my legal team was electric. I laid out every detail, every transaction, every forged signature. The attorney nodded slowly, eyes narrowing as he traced patterns in the ledger. This, he said, tapping the pages, is more than fraud. This is deliberate, systematic embezzlement. We can file a civil suit, freeze assets, and bring criminal charges. You have leverage they didn't see coming. I felt a rush of adrenaline. For years, I had been the silent partner, The good wife who smiled through arguments and shrugged off discrepancies. But now, with evidence in hand, I was untouchable. I could strike legally, strategically, and ensure that the person who had tried to ruin me would face consequences unlike anything he expected. The first legal maneuver was subtle, but devastating, an emergency injunction freezing all accounts tied to my husband and his sister. As soon as the papers were served, I watched their calm, calculated world crack. My husband called repeatedly, desperation in his voice, trying to manipulate, threaten, and negotiate. I stayed silent, letting every call ring into voicemail. His panic grew palpable. He realized for the first time that I wasn't just reacting, I was controlling the game. Meanwhile, whispers of the legal action spread through our social circles and extended family. The same people who had once dismissed me now began to treat me with cautious respect, wary of the storm that had been quietly building. My son watched all of it, awe and relief mixed in his eyes. He finally understood what I had endured for years and what I was capable of. But I also knew the danger. My husband wasn't finished. The ledger revealed only a portion of his web. More hidden accounts, offshore assets, and potential allies lurked beyond what I had discovered. Every legal strike would provoke a counterattack. I needed to anticipate it. That evening, as I reviewed the documents, a message appeared on my phone. It was from an unknown number. Stop now, or everyone you love will pay the price. My pulse quickened. They knew about the ledger. They knew I had the power. And they were ready to fight back with everything they had. I clenched my fists, determination replacing fear. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore, it was a war of wills. And I intended to win, fully, completely, and with consequences that would leave no one doubting who had the real power in this family. Who sent the threat, and what lengths will they go to protect their secrets? The day of the emergency hearing arrived faster than I expected. I thought I was prepared, but preparation hits different when you step into a room where the outcome decides your entire future. The courthouse corridors echoed with hurried footsteps, but mine felt louder, measured, intentional, deliberate. I wasn't rushing. I was choosing momentum. My attorney walked beside me carrying a confidence so sharp it could slice pride in half. Behind us trailed the auditor and forensic accountant, each holding thick envelopes sealed like bombs nobody knew were ticking. I could already imagine the shock waiting to explode, but I forced myself not to smile. Smiling too early is childish. Silence before victory is power. When I entered the courtroom, every stare felt like repayment for the thousands I had once endured invisibly. The judge, a strict woman with a kind of authority that didn't require volume, looked at me over her glasses. No sympathy, no pity, no softness. Just expectation, like she already knew someone would try to play theatrics in her courtroom. And then he walked in. My husband wasn't handcuffed yet. That happens later. That day he walked in still wearing arrogance tailored like a suit. His lawyer stood beside him building performance and posture alone, whispering instructions like this was some scripted playground. He glared at me. The kind of glare that says, "You're nothing if I choose you to be nothing." But that glare landed in a world that had already changed. His lawyer began the attack, predictable strategy, paint the wife unstable, emotional, dramatic, impulsive, irrational. Let the man look calm. Let the woman look cracked. Except I didn't crack. I opened the folder and slid the first document toward my attorney without even looking at it. Exhibit A, he announced. The judge raised an eyebrow. Then Exhibit B. Another eyebrow. Then Exhibit C. Silence got interested. The judge didn't bang her gavel. She didn't have to. The room became obedient by pressure alone. Even my husband's breathing changed rhythm. His lawyer glanced sideways like someone hearing the first drop of rain before a flood. Then she entered the story again. The auditor took her seat quietly. No flamboyance. No drama. Just assured presence, like she had rehearsed facts, not emotions. She unfolded a single page, adjusted her mic, and began speaking. She explained every forged authorization my husband had attempted, every masked transfer he routed through layers of corporate obscurity, every bank marker that screamed intent, not mistake. My husband tried to stand and interrupt, but the judge raised her hand. Sit. One word. he sat. The auditor continued. We also found encrypted device backups labeled under an alias tied to further asset relocation intended not just for concealment, but for personal extraction. The judge leaned forward now. The volume of truth had finally forced her curiosity. Then came the line that froze my spine. Your Honor, the next exhibits require authentication because the defendant created falsified consent audio to implicate the plaintiff. Consent audio. My voice. Their script. His weapon. Only difference? This time, I had the evidence before the world was ready for it. The judge looked at me again differently now, not emotional, not weak, not reactive. Dangerous. What exactly will the forensic authentication expose when they prove the audio was manufactured? Everything shifted the moment the judge ordered the digital audio to be played. The courtroom speakers crackled once before releasing a sound that was supposed to be my downfall. An AI-generated version of my voice, manipulated to say I had approved every suspicious transfer, every stolen dollar, every forged contract. My husband had built his legal defense on it. He wanted everyone to believe I gave consent. He wanted the law to see me as an accomplice in my own destruction. The audio played. At first, a few people glanced toward me with uncertainty. When something wears your voice, it also tries to wear your guilt. But guilt has a shape, a hesitation, a pain pattern. And I knew that recording had none of mine. My husband sat stiff, sweating, eyes locked on the judge, waiting for her reaction like a gambler watching roulette spin on someone else's life. But the judge didn't react the way he had imagined. Instead, she exhaled slowly and motioned for the forensic analyst to step forward. He built suspense just by walking. A thin man with wired glasses, a silver briefcase, and the calm of someone who doesn't deal with lies, he hunts them. His voice was level when he spoke, but the gravity under it pressed heavier than any scream ever could. The audio provided by the defense was created using synthesized voice replication. Metadata reveals multiple layer edits, intentional noise masking, and auto-tuned pitch smoothing that does not match the plaintiff's natural vocal stress response. Stress response. That phrase stabbed the defense before I could. Because I had cried. I had shouted. I had whispered heartbreak into pillows. My voice had experienced human damage. That audio had not. My husband's lawyer tried objecting, claiming the analysis could be wrong, manipulated, altered, biased, or incomplete. Then I made my second strike. My attorney spoke before I could even finish inhaling. Your Honor, we have the original unedited source file extracted from the defendant's device backup. We also have triangulated system origin logs proving model fabrication and intent to deceive. The judge commanded the sample to be compared, then played the original. Then the courtroom heard it too. And the difference was loud in proof, not volume. The AI voice was smooth, calm, clean, consenting. Mine, the real one, the authentic one in the file I had recorded days earlier during a confrontation, carried tremors, emotional micro-breaks, and vocal stress fractures. The room understood instantly. He had manufactured calm. I had lived chaos. Which one looked guilty now? My husband began shouting again, too loud now, too late, insisting, repeating himself, screaming at the auditor, the forensic team, even at his own lawyer. I didn't do it. She forced me. You're all lying. But screams without evidence are just noise. And evidence, calm or not, always speaks dominance. The judge didn't need to yell back. She just stared at him until his voice ran out of fuel. Then she said, "We will proceed to criminal referral and asset freeze, effective immediately. No argument. No bargaining. No stage theatrics left to perform." I had gone from whispered humiliation in an auditorium to silent priority in a courtroom war. And the war still wasn't done. If this is how far he went to fake my consent, what other truth is still encrypted behind the one mistake he can't undo? I wish the world had slowed down after the courtroom, but storms like this don't pause, they evolve. Now that the judge had frozen the accounts, the internet had turned into a global witness. But what mattered wasn't the noise outside. It was the silence inside the estate I had walked back into, armed with nothing but proof and intuition. My uncle-in-law's property wasn't just old money and memories, it was a mausoleum of evidence. I kept asking myself why a man I barely knew would trust me more than his own blood. Now I had my answer, because integrity is invisible until the moment it becomes lethal. I reached the study again. The cracked panel was still there, crooked like someone had once pried it open far too aggressively. This time, I was the one doing the prying. Behind it, sealed in plastic to survive even fire, was a thick envelope tied with twine. The handwriting wasn't urgent. It was respectful, careful, chosen. Emily, the one who listened when others rehearsed. My knees went cold against the floor as I opened it. Inside were documents, yes, but folded into their center was a single letter, personal, intentional, human. My uncle didn't just leave me evidence. He left me his voice in written form. They won't expect you to look here. They won't expect you to doubt him. They won't expect you to become the thing they feared. I inhaled like someone had pressed a hand between my lungs and spine. He knew the corruption ran deep. My husband, his sister, the advisors, possibly even lawyers. He had spent his final months diverting his true assets away from the people who wanted to hijack them. And in doing so, he had built a final delivery system that pointed to one person only. Me. The letter continued explaining my husband's habit of deleting notifications, laundering transfers through layers of corporate jargon, masking theft as administrative movement. It even listed access instructions to a second envelope inside the safe that we hadn't opened yet because it required biometric authorization from the rightful holder of truth, not titles. Titles don't survive God. Truth does. But the most chilling line was this. I did not choose you because you married into this family. I chose you because you made me feel seen when I felt erased. A holiday dinner moment. A warm plate passed. A laugh shared. A kindness shown. He remembered. My husband forgot. The table had turned. Tucked behind the letter was a USB drive wrapped in a foil pouch like it was protecting nuclear launch codes. On its surface was a label that made my pulse stall. Forensics will open this. He will scream when truth runs louder than his voice. I didn't know yet what was on it. I just knew. If my husband was roaring threatened now, then this drive contained the thing that would make him collapse into consequences his ego could never carry. And ego screams louder when it realizes it already lost. The envelope includes a second sealed note with my husband's name on it. What did the uncle thank me for, and why does the USB prove his betrayal was far from the worst secret buried here? I stared at the USB drive as though it could bite me. Its small size belied the weight it carried, the culmination of decades of manipulation, greed, and deception. My uncle had left it intentionally, knowing it would land in the hands of the only person capable of dismantling the network of lies, me. I plugged it into a secured laptop in the study, far from prying eyes. The folder inside was labeled simply, Proof and Redemption. My heart pounded. I knew the contents would ruin my husband, but I didn't yet know how far. The first files were spreadsheets, layered, complex, tying together every hidden account, every shell corporation, every manipulated inheritance my husband had tried to claim. Each number told a story of betrayal. The pattern was unmistakable. He had systematically siphoned assets not just from me, but from extended family members, employees, even charitable trusts. My stomach churned as I realized the scale. Next, I found correspondence, emails, scan letters, and internal memos, tying his sister directly to every fraudulent maneuver. She hadn't been a reluctant accomplice. She had been an active participant. Every excuse she had whispered, every explanation she had offered, was a lie. The room felt suffocating. For years, these lies had festered around me, invisible but omnipresent, and now I could see them laid bare. Then I found the most damning files, video recordings. Not doctored, not fabricated, real footage of my husband discussing transfers, forging signatures, and plotting to erase me financially. His arrogance was palpable, his confidence absolute, and the camera captured every detail. I could hear him laughing quietly, unaware that someone had been watching all along. And finally, at the center of the folder, a document my uncle had marked separately, a confession from my husband, drafted but never sent, admitting to every deception, every lie, every illegal maneuver. It was addressed vaguely, meant to appear as an internal memo to his sister, but the handwriting and timestamps revealed the intention. He never expected anyone else to read this. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a surge of both power and fear. This was more than a weapon. This was the culmination of everything he had tried to hide. Every illegal transaction, every betrayal, every lie was now mine to wield. And wield I would, but carefully. I knew the moment I exposed these files publicly or to authorities, my husband's world would collapse instantly. But the plan had to be meticulous. If I acted too early, he could retaliate. Too late, and he might try to manipulate the narrative. Timing, strategy, and precision would be my allies. I looked at my son. He didn't need to ask. He had witnessed every argument, every confrontation, every public breakdown. He knew the stakes. And as I held the USB, I realized the inheritance my uncle had left me wasn't just money, it was justice. With this evidence, I could destroy my husband entirely, but who else might fight to protect him, and what risks would I face when revealing the truth? If revenge had a sound, it would have been silence before a storm. Because that night, I didn't roar. I prepared. By morning, I had already copied the USB into 3 secure backups, one for my lawyer, one for authorities, and one buried so deep even a court order would need my fingerprints to summon it. My husband thought freezing accounts was the peak. He had no idea it was only the trailer. My lawyer messaged me requesting a private meet, so I drove faster than my emotions could run. Sitting in his modern glass office, I slid the USB across the desk, saying nothing. He inserted it, skimmed the files, and for the first time someone didn't just believe me, they saluted the truth I carried. "Emily," he said calmly, "this evidence doesn't just end him, it ends dynasties of denial." We made the final legal strategy. A move not loud, but irrevocable. I signed the authorization for forensic verification and a public exposure injunction, meaning once the data was validated, it could be presented as evidence and released for public record, so no amount of gaslighting could bury it again. Then came graduation day. The ceremony was beautiful. My son was brighter than shame could ever dim. I sat 10 rows from the stage, calm like a verdict waiting for its judge. My husband was there too, smiling for cameras, rehearsing sympathy like he hadn't rehearsed abandonment. After the diplomas, after the applause, while families took photos, I walked toward him. Slowly. Deliberately. His sister was beside him. His mother too. The entire league of people who believed DNA was stronger than ethics. They watched me approach like I was a defeated subplot. Oh, but I was the plot twist. I stopped in front of him. And I spoke the one sentence that detonated his ego. The USB has been verified. The courts already know. Now the world will too. His smile didn't crack. It shattered. His phone fell from his hand. His face flushed with a shade not of anger, but exposure. And then he screamed, not from dominance, but the collapse of it. "Where did you get that? Who helped you? You should have stayed quiet." People turned. Heads pivoted. Conversations froze mid-sentence. His voice ricocheted across the marble hall like someone accidentally pressed play on a monster's confession. His mother gasped, "Control yourself." His sister snarled at me, "You're ruining the family." Ruining? No. Revealing. I raised my phone, already recording, feeling no tremor. No apology. No doubt. "I'm not ruining anything," I said at his volume, at his eye level, at his downfall. "I'm introducing the truth your last name tried to gatekeep." The crowd wasn't shocked by my evidence. They were shocked by his fear of it. He lunged as though to grab the drive that wasn't even physically there anymore. Security stepped forward instinctively, not on his behalf, but out of public instinct to contain someone spiraling. That's when he realized it. No one was protecting him anymore. They were protecting themselves from being associated with the moment he fell. The moment my uncle trusted me with. The moment he warned would make him scream. The moment every lie finally lost its insurance policy. And with that scream echoing, cameras rolling, and truth no longer negotiable, I whispered the final internal vow to myself. He didn't just lose me that day, he lost the narrative he thought he owned forever.